Hi, and welcome to this episode of the Overgivers Anonymous Podcast. My name is Angela Mondor, and I'm also known as the Geeky Girl. And we're going to geek out a little bit today because I want to talk to you about resource allocation and how you can be successful, even with this fantastic neurodivergent brain you have. First of all, I want to say that I'm recording this, and Zoom did an update just this week. And you know, when your resources change and you weren't anticipating the change, and a lot of us have said, hey, you know what, Zoom, I did not ask for what you just did. That's okay. Part of resource allocation is all about the concept of how our resources change. And so we have to test, adjust, sometimes we have to remove things. There's a lot that moves. There's a lot of moving parts when it comes to resources inside our businesses. And there's some things that can be really challenging for us as neurodivergent human beings as well, when it comes to how do we manage these things inside our business. So resources can be defined as, the things in the business. You want to talk about like your computers, like my lighting system, my microphone, the computer screens, the laptop, the keyboard and mouse, like these are all resources, but so are our SaaS programs and other programs that we purchase inside the business, as well as our team members and our own time, and of course, money. There are so many different resources inside the business. None of them are, more important than the others in some ways. We definitely have to balance out which resources we're using and how do we use them. And a lot of times you've heard me talk about the fact that you either have time or money to deal with in the business. So if you don't have a lot of time, you need to spend some money. And if you don't have a lot of money, you got to spend more time. That's a resource allocation concept. Also, you've probably heard me talk about business products, right? So your SaaS programs, maybe you've purchased some SaaS programs and you don't remember what you've purchased or what you use or what you're not using anymore. And then on top of that, maybe you even have some courses. I literally just did a course purge recently where I'm started to collect things in one place. So all of these things, we're talking about how do we allocate all of these resources and use them to the best of our abilities. Now, when we're looking at the different ways that we see challenges as neurodivergent human beings, and this just depends on your brain and how your brain works. But here's some things that maybe you have that are going on that maybe are challenging for you when it comes to this resource allocation. Number one thing that I see a lot in business owners who are neurodivergent is this concept of having rejection sensitivity. If you don't know what that is, you can quickly Google it. I'll give you a quick flyby. But essentially, you don't want to maybe leave a mastermind, or maybe you don't want to stop paying for a product because you feel bad about the person you've purchased it from. You don't want them to think poorly of you because you've left their mastermind or you've stopped paying for their monthly whatever it is. That is a form of rejection sensitivity, and that can impact some of the decisions you make if you're not aware that that's the reason why you're making those decisions. One of the other things that can happen to us as neurodivergent entrepreneurs, if this is how your brain works, is the concept of object permanence. So if something's not in your purview, if you can't see it, then it doesn't exist. And that's really difficult when it comes to the tech pieces of our business, because you've signed up for courses, or maybe you've downloaded a freebie, or maybe you've put some ideas into maybe your ClickUp platform. And because you don't see them physically, because they're not spread out on your desk, you might forget them. There's lots of different ways that our neurodivergent brains are amazing. And there's ways that we can think outside the box, and maybe we can see a resource and we're able to allocate that in ways that a neurotypical brain wouldn't even think about doing. But we want to also be able to say, what are our strengths and what are our weaknesses, and how do we mitigate those weaknesses? So when it comes to resource allocation, one of the best things to do for us is to make sure that we are thinking about it. And that can be difficult with that whole object permanence piece, right? But if you've planned out when you're going to be reviewing these things, it can be easier for you to catch the things in action as to what's going on. This is the same for finance resources, time resources. It doesn't matter which resources you are currently managing inside your business. They can slip or get out of control in some ways if you're not revisiting them often. And the team members, this one's tough because this one is very, very much centered on the rejection sensitivity piece, because it can be hard. You love your team member, but maybe they're just not doing what you want them to do. Maybe they're a great friend, or maybe they're somebody you like spending time with, but they're not doing the job. And then there's that concept of, How do I get them to do the job? Or how much rope do I give them in order to make sure that they have what they need to get the job done? Those are some really tough things that you have to manage as a business owner. And that rejection sensitivity, if you have it, if it's something that you struggle with, then it can be really difficult. As an overgiver, the rejection sensitivity is really strong. We are overgiving because we want people to love us. And it can be difficult to have to let somebody go. But it's important for the business to understand where they fit. We talk about the right bums in the right seats. You might have the right bum, and maybe you just got them in the wrong seat. Maybe you don't need to fire them. Maybe we just need to move them into a different position. So there's different ways to look at the resources inside your business. And so it's important for you to think about that. Your time management is also really important. Time can get away from us very quickly, especially if you struggle with time blindness, where literally you sit down to do a task and all of a sudden five hours are gone, or you have a task that you know needs to get done by 4 o'clock, and all of a sudden it's 3:30, and you're like, oh, that's going to take me an hour. Somehow we managed to get it done in time, generally. But that's a time blindness thing. And so understanding what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses, or what are some things that your brain does to you that makes you really uncomfortable when it comes to these resource managements. You can leverage SaaS programs, certainly with ClickUp. When you're putting things in ClickUp, make sure they have a due date, make sure they're assigned to you, those kinds of things so that they pop up. Make sure that you're moving things along. If something is supposed to be done today, but really you need to put it off to tomorrow, change the due date. There's lots of different ways that you can continue to keep managing your notifications, obviously, is something really important as well. Email can get away from you. It's a resource though, so you want to be careful about how you manage that email resource. Now for me, all of our client emails come straight into ClickUp, so they are tasks. So we very rarely will miss something that's come from a client or something that's important. But if you're not doing things like that, one of the things that I love most about Gmail is the fact that I have those tabs on top, and I can train Gmail to put different things in different tabs. That has helped as well when I'm looking at, that resource of information that's coming through. So what I think is really important is making sure you have a supportive community around you, somebody that you can help body double with, somebody who, when you are working, you can say, hey, I got this thing and how do I work through it? Body doubling has been very positive for me in so many different ways. One of the programs that we offer here, we actually do Pomodoros every Tuesday, and we basically body double getting shit done inside our business. So you can actually have communities and set up so that you can actually reach out and say, hey, hold on a second, I need some help. I'm trying to build this thing, but I've been sidelined by this. That's really important to be able to lean on those kinds of resources. So when you're looking at these different pieces, it's important to be able to identify them and be able to say, hey, you know what? I'm really good at this. I'm really struggling with this. How do I mitigate what I'm struggling with? It is important to regularly review your resources and put a bit of a schedule to it. And if as you do it, you don't need to work as hard as at the scheduling, because it becomes a routine. It becomes a habit. Once it's a habit, it's okay, but it takes a while to get into the habit. And us neurodivergents, sometimes we have a really great habit going and then we break off and then we have to rebuild the habit again. That's okay. That's totally normal. So if you've built the habit once, you can build it a second time, and maybe you need to tweak it. Maybe it's not quite right now. So you need to just update it a little bit. So you can do that and schedule some periodic check-ins, right? In the Rockstar Success Circle, we check in every month, every quarter, and of course we build a plan for the entire year. Those check-ins are really great when we're managing resources, because we talk about what's our availability of our time, what's availability of the team's time, what do we need to get done within this time, and how much time do we actually have to get these things done? What resources do we have to be able to use in order to make these, goals a success, and those kinds of things. So when you're looking at your resources, if you're struggling with these kinds of things, you might want to consider reaching out and asking about the Rockstar Success Circle. But what's really important is make sure you're taking the time to actually allocate some time to check in on your resources. Make sure that your finances are in order. Make sure your spending versus your income is where you need it to be in order to be successful in your business. Checking on your SaaS programs on a regular basis. Checking on your team, making sure the team's actually doing the things that you need them to do in order to be successful inside the business. All of these resources that you have are fantastic, but they aren't great if they're all going in different directions. So it is important to check in. It's important to make sure that all of the resources are in line and they're moving you towards that goal that you're trying to accomplish at the end of the year. I hope that you take away some really cool stuff from this video. Maybe you can think about the different ways that the resources in your business, some of them are working for you, some of them are working against you, and how can you align those things? What are your strengths? How do you mitigate those weaknesses that you have as a neurodivergent person, and rely on the strengths that you have as a neurodivergent person? That's your superpower. So we want you to spend as much time in there as possible. So I hope you were able to take some stuff away. Certainly love to hear from you. If you're listening to this on the audio podcast, you can send us an email at clientcare@geekygirl.ca. And if you're here on YouTube, you can leave a comment below if you have a question or comment about resource allocation in your business. I hope you have a fantastic week, and we'll talk to you next week. Thank you so much for listening to the Overgivers Anonymous podcast. Your support means the world to me. You can find show notes for this episode and other goodies at overgiversanonymous.ca. And if you enjoyed this episode or you enjoyed the podcast in general, why not join us in the Overgivers Anonymous Facebook group, where you can connect with overgivers from all over the world. Head on over to geekygirl.ca/group.